Hey everyone, welcome back to Empowered and Out, the podcast where we focus on building careers that actually feel aligned, confident, and sustainable. I'm your host, Jonathan, career coach and advocate for showing up fully at work. And this season, we're talking about visibility and authenticity, what it really takes to unmask, own your identity, and lead without leaving parts of yourself behind. And this year, we're doing things differently. We're elevating, we're expanding, we're prospering together through real conversations and coaching centered insights. My goal is to help you reconnect with your confidence, trust yourself more, and start making career choices that support not just your success, but your well being as well. So take a breath, settle in, and let's get into today's conversation. So today's guest writes from the liminal spaces, the quiet thresholds where memory, identity, time, and becoming blur into something truer than certainty. Colin Belcourt is a writer based just outside Ottawa, Ontario, and the author of The Blue Hour Gospel, a lyrical, fragmented memoir that moves through queer time and space, self-erasure, and survival, and the tender act of learning how to remain when the world teaches you to disappear. His work invites us into the in-between, the moments we often rush past, but where so much of our real life actually unfolds. Before turning more fully toward writing, Colin spent over a decade in human resources, DEI, and sustainability, helping organizations navigate change and imagine more inclusive ways of belonging. That work, rooted in identity, culture, and systems, quietly shaped the questions he would later begin asking on the page. Who gets to belong? What do we carry? And what do we unlearn in order to stay whole? The Blue Hour Gospel lives at the intersection of the professional and the personal, part history, part confession, part myth, tracing a life lived in thresholds while witnessing how queer community, language, and visibility continue to evolve over time. I'm really honored to sit in this conversation with Colin today, to explore how we tell our stories, how we survive the spaces between who we were and who we're becoming, and how authenticity becomes both a practice and a form of liberation. So, Colin, welcome to Empowered and Out.
And welcome very much. Although I will say, I just got finished with the Gen Z episode that you did. And when I heard in your intro a decade of the time spent in this, I was like, no, 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 no. I'm young. I'm young.
All right. So before we jump in, this is a new segment in my podcast that I am doing this year. It's called the Energy Check-In. So on a scale from 1 to 10, how is your energy today? And what's contributing to that number?
I totally have PTSD from this question. I'm not going to lie, because at like 2 companies ago, I had a chief people officer that would ask us this. And if you didn't say like 9 or 10, you would be like, why? What's wrong? What's going on? And I was like, let me be a 6. Let me be a 5. I'm just living my best life. But I will say, so if she does listen to this, which I imagine maybe she will, I would say I'm a 9, and that's just because the energy of community this year has been, like, rocketing me through so much, and just the absolute way that people, I think, have shown up this year in ways that I never even would have guessed has just been so invigorating that I'm like, 9. A solid 9 is a good place to start.
I love that. That's awesome. I mean, of my guests so far, everyone is right at the top. They're like
Oh,
9, 10.
they're
Like they're right.
liars.
No, they aren't liars. Well, no, they're not liars because I feel very humbled because one of my guests did say that they were excited because they're excited for this. They were like they're
Mhm.
pumped and they're excited to come on and do this podcast. So, and of course, I was excited to have them as a guest. So, of course, I would hope you come, I would hope my guests and I would hope that they come in as, maybe at 8, 9, 10. But if they're not,
Mhm.
that's okay. We all have life. Things happen. And something could have happened crazy right before we jump on. Something could have happened this week, whatever, we're living life. So anything's possible. And especially because of what recently has been happening here in the United States, especially in Minnesota, that could really definitely bring people's energy
Mm-hmm.
levels down. So anyway, to our conversation. So let's talk about the heart of the book. You describe The Blue Hour Gospel as a book about queer becoming, living in the in between spaces of memory, desire, silence, and chosen life. For someone just discovering your work, what's the heart of this book for you?
The beating heart of the book. I think a lot of not even just the book in general, but what drove me towards the book is this interesting aspect that I think a lot of people don't normally think about. And that's just like queer time versus hetero time. And there's tons of brilliant authors out there or like theory speakers, especially Elizabeth Freeman, I think her name was, who talks about like, I think her piece was called Time Binds. And she goes into this thing about like chrononormativity, where it's referring to like the time where we organize individual bodies towards your maximum productivity, and how that differs with queer people because any of those people that are often marginalized and don't conform to those temporal norms often feel out of space and time and over and above and beyond. So it was this kind of juxtaposition, especially as I age, I will go back to that you really start to see that life and the way it plays out for any of us in the queer community is quite different, I think, than that in the hetero or other communities. So it really turned into this centralized piece, especially for those of us before the internet. Like time, I guess nowadays is measured in like shorts and attention spans and all that. But before that, before we had all the tracking and the watching and the exposure, it did move at a different space too. So I wanted
Mhm.
to bring a little flavor of what a lot of us are going through right now and relate it to times in other of our lives that we often touch and say, like, look at these differences. Look at how we look at things, and maybe start to examine where we might start to celebrate instead of questioning why are we different.
All right. So, why did you choose a fragmented, nonlinear structure instead of a traditional memoir format?
So I wanted to do that because, and I often get in such lovely arguments with people because I'll be saying the way queer people not even just interact with the world, but the way that the world interacts with us is so much different. Like if I'm looking at in the workplace, one of my colleagues, male, same age, same like he's Caucasian, same background and stuff, but he's straight. The interactions that I see with him versus with me are so different. So when I was looking at the fragmented approach, I was like, why would I want to tell a story in the exact same way that's out there that never really encompasses us? Because nothing that we do is ever straightforward. It's always fragmented. I wanted to kind
Mhm.
of break out and celebrate that too in a way that's like, we do bring such uniqueness and we do bring these different mediums and ways to speak. And I think it's more special to start telling our stories in that way versus just falling in line and recycling the same ideas that are out there.
All right. I like that. And so, what do you think the fragments allow readers to feel or access emotionally?
Now, what I hope it does is it gives them the freedom to interact with not only just interact with each piece, because I mean, some pieces do go into quite serious subject matter, obviously. But I wanted to give the opportunity to start looking at some of these subjects from different lenses. And I think also when not even just me in general, but any queer person out there does deep down benefit from having these different things because it leads us to start looking at our own lives, other people's lives in different ways. And it could help us not come to terms, but it could help us start thinking and recognizing patterns in ourselves. So I was really hoping that readers would be able to take different meaning from each piece and build the story almost in a way that makes sense to them, not even what makes sense to me or what makes sense to Jonathan or what makes sense to the person down the street, just how it speaks to them and how they could probably tell their story.
I like that. That's a smart way to do it. And I hope the reader gets that from the book
I
because it
hope
sounds a
if I did it
great
right.
way. If you yeah, if you did it right, it should work that way. So, one of the strong themes that you explore is self-erasure as a survival strategy. How we learn to disappear in small ways to stay safe, loved, or accepted. How did you start noticing that pattern in your own life?
And this is my big one. This is my huge topic. And this is what I'm actually learning over time. I'm like identifying more and more and speaking to other people about because it's crazy to me how we don't even realize 95% of the time, I would say, that we're doing this. Like, I think there's so many of us that have just gotten so good at trying to fit in or trying to be that person that we've now just put the blinders on and we're going at it. So when you say, when did you move? It's like, well, this was like yesterday. This was maybe like last year, the year before. But it did start in a really good therapy session when someone asked what I liked, like who was I? And I was like, I don't know, who am I? Tell me who I am. Can you give me the answer, please? And it really stopped me in my path and was like, well, shit. I don't. Here I was this whole time thinking I was building myself into this one thing, but I didn't understand that I was chipping and chipping and chipping and chipping and chipping. And while it was daunting to think, who is this person in front of me? Now I'm in this positive mindset of it really helped rebuild and it really helps you start naming things. But I think that moment of, right, maybe I do need someone to tell me who I am a little bit came about through a lovely therapist. So if you're not in therapy, I strongly recommend anyone has someone good to talk to.
Yeah, actually, I've never had therapy, but I have good friends who are therapists, and my sister thinks I'm crazy for not having a therapist all these years, but because she had a therapist for a very long time. Sorry to call you out, sis, but you know, I think sometimes we do need it, and they're there for a reason.
What's wild too, especially for like, and I was thinking with this podcast and when you're talking about like careers and professional world and just showing up, it's crazy how much we do it. Like I said, without knowing we're doing it. So like language editing with, say,
Hmm.
you're at work and you're saying, oh, like my partner, or you're just saying general pronouns, or when you're policing yourself with your language to be low maintenance and avoid all that scrutiny. And you're scanning, like you're doing the visibility mental math in your head of who's safe, who's senior in this room, who's the vibe. Like we are literally going into so many situations that you could probably find in a day, in an hour, or in like 20 minutes where we're just editing ourselves to death.
It's really kind of sad that do it, but we do. I can think of hundreds of situations, be it in the work or personal, that I definitely hid, of my life. And I don't do that so much anymore because, I mean, I would hope that when I'm in my 50s, as I am, that I could be more of myself. That's why I have this podcast. That's why I coach to help people get to that point. But I also understand, as I've mentioned many times and, on this podcast, but in my coaching as well, that there's life. It's reality. Sometimes you can't show up how you really want to show up just because of the situations around you. So,
Well, and there's a duality, I think, behind it too, where you not only have this level of policing that you're doing out in, we'll say, the real world, but then if you look even inter-community, where it starts to get into the shame and the belonging dynamics and erasing
mhm.
yourself in a way to stay in the circle. Like I know if this one, I will not say his name, we'll call him Frank. He is bi, and he's married to a female, and he was posting all of his content, right? And he was trying to break into getting in touch more with his queer side and being that. And of course, wall up in the community, it's like you're bi, you're married to a woman. Nope, 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 nope. You don't understand. But it was funny because when he suddenly changed his posts to be more like stereotypically queer, like dress or like mannerisms and behavior, suddenly his stuff skyrocketed. And I was like, okay,
Huh.
interesting that like you want to do that to be part of it, but at the same time, like we as a community should not be making you change who you are just to get some sort of traction within our own community, right? Like we
Yeah.
face that policing by so many other people, and then we turn around and we police the same people in our group. So it's like you got your real world one and then you got us. And there's just like this crazy burnout logic that I don't think anyone ever truly sees behind the scenes.
That is very true. So we gently touched on this earlier. Gently. That's such a weird term that I just said. Anyways, we touched on, I don't know where that came from. Sorry, listeners and viewers. I don't know where. Anyway, so we talked a little bit briefly about queer time, the
Uh-huh.
idea that our lives don't always move in neat linear milestones, and that grief, growth, and identity can loop and revisit us. How has queer time shaped how you understand your own life?
I think that one is a hard question because I think it evolves. It's constantly evolving. If I think back to when I started writing based on this that one fabulous activity that the therapist at the time gave me when he was like, "Have you tried journaling?" And I was like, "Who would journal? Like that's not going to serve me whatsoever." Here I am, who wrote a book about myself because of this. So correct, it was it's right. But my view on the time and, like, anything that had happened to me to date was very not fragmented, but it was very, again, blinders on, "Okay, this was who I was in that moment. This is who I am now. How does that correlate, and how am I looking at it?" And then, of course, as you, like, grow and you start to notice patterns in yourself, maybe of, like, toxic behavior or just tendencies that we have to think about ourselves in, like, a negative light, you really start to look back on things and be like, oh, okay, interesting. So I did think there was this time before where, say, I was treated differently because of this. But now I'm looking back at it and I'm thinking, oh, maybe I was treating myself differently. And that's what I was picking up on. And I think a lot of that does start to come out in ways. This is going to be. I was like, when it comes to time, this is good. These will always be my answers. Where all of a sudden I'm going to lose you and all of the viewers because they're going to be like, "What is he rambling?" Because I could talk about. I love time. If you talk about like, timelines, time, whatever, I could do it for forever. So
Well,
apologies for that. But I think to your question and your point earlier is like we hear a lot of people saying too, the way we look at time, a lot of us are more not experimenting, but we're more comfortable with who we are later in life, which means we do almost go through like not a second adolescence or teenager years, but we do all of a sudden experience joy and freedom and things a whole lot differently than we did back in that time. Because for
uh-huh.
95% of us, there was a whole lot of us who were like, please don't see me, please don't see me, please don't see me. Like, I'm just here flying under the radar. So I think that too really influenced how I looked at time in general and how I wanted to represent that in because I do think there's a huge subset of our community, of anyone over a certain age, that is made to feel like they're being pushed out or aged out because they're past all of these things that could have happened in their life. And I'm like, no, they're experiencing it now. And that is something that we need to do better at calling out as well.
I agree. And it's funny what you were just talking about, like the different times. I remember not wanting to be seen. I still can picture my very first time ever being in a gay bar. And I remember so one of the things the bar did on Sunday nights, which is where I was, what night it was they would find people in the audience and pull them up on stage to either do karaoke, which I was fine with. I sing. That didn't bother me. The karaoke actually didn't bother me at all. Or this was what bothered me and made me nervous, was getting up on stage as well and pretty much stripping down to your underwear.
Thank you.
Now for me, thankfully, well, it was still nerve wracking. I got pulled up on stage and I was so nervous. I'm sitting there thinking, of course, this is such a gay thing to think about. I was like, oh my gosh, what underwear am I wearing? What looks good? What all these things are going through my head. And I'm like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. And then in the end, it was karaoke. And I was like, all right, I can do that. No problem. And it was a song that I knew, which was even better. But what freaked me out the most, and I think this is what actually made me the most paranoid, is all of a sudden I was spanning the audience and boom, I saw a person that I knew that did not know that I was gay. And I freaked out. And luckily, nothing ever came about out, from it. But I was so paranoid that I was going to be seen and be talked about. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, Jonathan's gay. I mean, of course, by that point, I was in my 20s. It wasn't really
Different.
hidden
Right.
overall. It just was. I was at that point in my life personally, and it's funny that I've talked about this, is that I wasn't fully ready to really be out to everyone. And so when I saw that person that had known me and, for quite a while, I was so nervous. And luckily in the end, it didn't matter. And I rocked it, by the way. I rocked the karaoke. I got
knew it. So I'm making mental notes, and I'm like, if I'm ever there and I go into a karaoke bar, make sure that you're not there, because I want nothing to do with karaoke, but you would totally pull people out there. So I'm like, no.
Oh, by the way, I hate karaoke. I despise it. It's not, because most of the time people get up there. I wouldn't say hate is a strong word. I dislike it. And I think it's because here's the problem for me, or the challenge for me, is I'm in choir. I'm with people that know how to sing. And so when I hear some drunk person get up on stage or get up in the wherever they're doing the karaoke and they butcher some song that you might have liked, and now all you can think of is that horrible rendition that they did. It's hard. No, I can't. It's very hard for me to experience that. So, but yeah.
But I think also what you hit on there too, like before, to go like way, way, way back, which I just have to say this because this is the other thing I'm like realizing about time and space too, in the queer community, is we all generally have almost the exact same like incidents in our lives, where like if I think back to the main bar, like not even a club, but bar in Toronto at the time when I was going out, there would be certain nights of the week where it would be like you say, best body contest. And you would get pulled, like people would either volunteer or the drag performer who was hosting would pull someone up on stage and basically be like, well, time to take your clothes off. And it's like,
Yep.
to be in the thing at that point is you basically feel like you're playing Russian roulette with the gun and you're like, please don't point it at me. Please don't.
One thing I did learn really quickly right after that, I got to know that drag queen host of that Sunday nights. So what I got to do was I had the fun of working with them to see, oh, what hot guy in the audience do I want up on stage to strip?
Too funny.
It worked.
Smart.
For the most part. Now, unfortunately, at one point, she went against me and she got me up on stage and I did have to strip down to my underwear. But anyway, it happens. I didn't die. I'm here. I was
going to say, you're here, you're thriving. It was just a blip in your timeline.
Exactly. And I am so not the same person that I was back then. I am completely different. So where do you see people getting stuck trying to force themselves into timelines that don't actually fit them?
Hard one. I would say for the majority of people, or if you were looking for, I don't want to say an easy way out because it makes it sound less than, but like the number one thing would be look at everyone in your life and you start comparing yourself to them. Like, are you meeting the same milestones? Are you achieving the same things when they're achieving it? So I think that's the typical one where people will start. But I've noticed more and more that it also is shifting on the queer front to those intercommunity timelines and dynamics. So we see, at least from my perspective, I see everything in the mainstream media. So like your popular TV shows, please don't hate me, all of your Hero rivalry fans. But we're seeing these shows play out in very stereotypical ways, I would say, where before a lot of us were saying, oh, like we're timeline comparing to our hetero counterparts. But now we have these queer versions of timelines being fed to us by people, and a lot of us buying into it and being like, oh, this is also what I have to accomplish now. And I think a lot of us, me included, a lot of the time, aren't necessarily onto that. We're still eyeing up that like hetero timeline of, oh, I'm not here yet, that we don't even realize this other one is sneaking in and throwing a wrench into our plan. Like we're basically riding a bike and that timeline is sitting in a bush and stuck a stick in our wheel and we've tripped, but we're like, hey, it was you. So I think that that's the secret, like the secret culprit behind everything that we'll see more and more happen, especially as we get more and more exposure and different stories are coming out. We're going to see that. And especially with AI advances, people feeding into those algorithms, it really is defining what what our community should look like and when we should be accomplishing things. And we're going to see that comparison more and
That's going to be very interesting.
more.
And I
Scary.
say that because our community as a whole is a plethora of so many different types of people.
It is.
And I feel that, which is good, don't get me wrong. But one of the challenges I've seen a little bit recently is the clashing of certain generations
Mhm,
and, well, how we were brought up and how what we experienced. And for instance, just to, and I haven't had this experience, but I've seen this. I've seen this in some people, but I've also I've chatted about it with others. Is the difference between, just for instance, Gen X and Gen Z. Gen Z pretty much has come out of the gate, rainbow flag flying, queer as can be, whatever they identify as, and which is awesome. Don't get me
mhm,
wrong. It is amazingly awesome that they get to be who they are. But I feel in some ways they need to acknowledge that there are people from my generation that helped that happen, that you are able
mhm,
to be in that spot.
mhm,
Because when I was growing up, I was even nervous going to my first Pride. I think that if we can come to a common ground, it's why I started, partially kind of started off the season, not really, but I did, with talking to someone who is Gen Z. Now, they are a heterosexual male. I do want to get someone who is a part of the queer community because I do want to really get their take,
mhm,
because it's very interesting. I have seen clashing personally with someone who is a millennial
mhm.
regarding identity and community. And I'm probably gonna have some massive tangent at some point, some episodes that I interview people regarding it, because I'll just say stay tuned, listeners, and viewers, because I have some very strong opinions about some stuff that I've seen recently, and it is probably because of how I grew up and what
Mhm,
I've been around in the
mhm,
community. And I think that sometimes things just need to be brushed off. Don't get me
mhm,
wrong, everyone who is a part of our community needs to be identified and acknowledged how they want to be acknowledged and identified.
mhm,
100%.
mhm,
100%. But I still think there are certain terminology. For instance, saying something as simple as like, hey, you guys, that
mhm.
is something that is such a generalized term. But I know that someone I know recently got very offended because the choir that I'm in, we have two insanely talented people in our choir that identify as trans. And they're
Mhm.
awesome. They're really great. I mean, they really are. They were acknowledged as, just the whole group was acknowledged as, hey guys. And this person got very offended by it, that they called them just guys. But I
Mhm.
don't think they understand, being a millennial, that this is what we grew up with as a Gen Xer, that's kind of a terminology that it's just a term. Like, it doesn't mean anything sexual. It doesn't mean that our director was calling them male.
Mhm.
He was just using it as an overarching like term, like, hey, you
Mhm.
guys. And I
Yeah.
think that they got to get over it first and
I'm like
just
dragon.
just live life and stop being nitpicky at stuff like that. But
Yeah.
we're gonna go into a
Really,
whole thing.
there's this person that you actually made me just think about right there, Eve Sedgwick. And the writing is all around visibility. Like what I would equate that to with like the Gen Zs and the newer people is like, look at the visibility we have, like we're free. But more of the writing is more about, just because you're seen doesn't automatically mean freedom if the terms of you being seen are hostile. And it's trying to get people to look around that type of thing. So the minute you said that, I was like, I have to, if anyone's interested, check out Eve Sedgwick, because it's interesting to think about it that way, especially from the lens of, okay, maybe I'm not free to be visible. Like maybe I'm visible, sure, but it's there's more behind it.
Well, and of course, obviously, we're talking about this season about visibility and authenticity.
Mhm,
So it is hard. It is hard. Don't get
mhm,
me wrong. It is hard. It's a challenge. And I feel that as we grow, as we get older, that visibility and authenticity becomes easier, or
mhm,
it should be. It should be
mhm.
getting easier for you. But don't give up. Just
I was gonna
that's all
say,
I got to
don't give
say.
up. And sure, we can say get easier, but if we think back to that guy I mentioned who was posting, it's like when
Yeah. I mean,
we're visible, all of a sudden it's like his visibility went in the opposite direction. So when you say like there's so many people in our community and like things sometimes get overgeneralized, it's like it's true. It's and I don't think people realize that it does go both ways. And that is something to
all right, so let's get back on topic now that we've
look
gone off on tangent for a little bit. Excuse me. So, another powerful thread in the book is talking about desire and safety, especially navigating intimacy without reliable templates. What have you learned about tenderness, power, and repair in queer relationships?
at. What I've learned, I think, is to start off is that a lot of queer people and how we look at like even just queer desire is a lot of us are trained to ask, is it safe? Before we even start to ask, is it true? And it's that part that starts to, again, it's that proverbial stick in the wheel, in the spoke. It's throwing us off before we even get going. And what I think more about this is not spoken up again enough about is just being in the community and wanting to belong, but fearing what comes with it.
Uh-huh.
Everyone thinks, oh, just because you're there and you have a safe space and stuff, that it's way easier and stuff. But it's like it's not. It's almost scarier when you're with the people that should be doing it because though that's when you're going to be vulnerable. And yeah, less on that less on the theory and academia side and more on the heart side, but it's just the lack of that that's in the community that is I think where a huge chunk of conversation should go.
I like that. And I agree. So, how can people start building safer emotional or relational spaces for themselves?
I think the easiest in a weird way is reminding ourselves at literally every interaction. I know it sounds monotonous, but almost like every interaction we have, reminding ourselves the majority of us don't want to fit into all of these basic stereotypes, community standards, like we're not here to play the game and you don't like but we're all playing the game because we don't want to be left to the fringe in the
Mhm.
one point that we're not. So I think just that one recognition can go a long way because it does change how you start to show up and interact with people. But I think almost more important is starting to notice and recognize your own patterns and just being truthful to yourself versus what you think everyone else out there in the world thinks that you should be doing or even like your friends in the same community should be doing because the more people get comfortable with that and start showing up as their more authentic selves and less of these community standards, the easier it's going to be over time to just chip that away where it's not even a thing that we have to talk about it.
I agree with you. It's funny thinking back, and when I was coming out, and it was this big show at the time was Queer as Folk. And of
Mm,
course, my friends, we were like, okay, well, who are you? What character are you?
mhm,
How do we relate to this? And I remember, and that's why I said earlier, I'm so not that person that I was overall back in my
mhm,
20s and I am now in my 50s, because I was trying to create an image to be able to fit in to, those popular gays. So I would be, seen to be able to date whoever I wanted to be able to date, whatever. And in truth, once I became more comfortable a little bit in my skin
mhm,
and I hung out with the people that I really wanted to hang out with,
mhm,
and meaning that I kind of learned through being around and socializing in the bar, like on a Friday, Saturday, or whatever, that I knew that, okay, well, I wanted to be with Joe over here, but he's kind of an asshole. And like, I don't really want to be part of that in that group. If that's how he is, that's probably how the people that he hangs out with are. And
mhm,
so I learned that let's take a little bit more step back and kind of observe a little bit more. And I was
mhm,
actually told at one point that because I would kind of sit back and observe. when I was
Mhm.
in the bar. And people said that I seemed really stuck up because I wasn't chatting, I was observing. I'm like, well, I'm not a whore and I'm not going to hook up with every single person at the bar. And I like to stand back and kind of observe because I did see people that I initially thought, oh, that's a really cute guy, or that's someone that I might want to,
Mhm.
hang out with. And then I got to see them from week to week or day to day. And then I realized, maybe not.
Yeah.
I thought that person was cool. And then of course you kind of learn the right people to hang out with. You don't Now, if I had been someone who was very much into, like, say, drugs or whatever, which I wasn't, I
Mhm.
never have done really any, then I probably would have swerved over to that group of, those people. Even the drinking got old. Like, I don't think I even spent, in truth, I don't even think I spent even 5 years in the gay bars, just because it wasn't my scene.
Mhm.
I had grown up as an athlete. I'd grown up in choir. I'd grown up in these different circles that sitting, standing, don't get me wrong, I loved the dancing. I loved, some of the stuff going to the bars, but getting plastered and wasting ridiculous amounts of money to, okay, where did it get me? It
Mhm.
didn't get me anywhere.
Uh-huh.
It got me to have a really bad hangover the next 2 days. And sometimes having to go to work with a hangover,
It's
and that wasn't
true.
fun. So I feel that building those safer spaces and being more authentic is what's more important. But you have to, it comes with growth. And I think just in general, we grow as humans, just overall. But I
Mhm.
feel that when you get in the right group of people in the queer community, you're going to be really able to be yourself.
I was gonna say you're gonna be able to flourish. So I think a lot of it too is just building those. You will learn. I think if anything, queer people, gay people, like whatever you wanna, which label you want to use, we've all gotten so good at being hyper vigilant in every situation where like you're looking at a room again to see like who's safe, who's like, can I be myself here? So the funny thing is where we show up inauthentically to ourselves in the community, we all know each other's bullshitting it because we're like, hello,
Oh,
we're
yeah.
trading it. Give us our CIA contracts. Give us our FBI contracts. But we can pick up money. Make me a traitor, goddammit. CDC, hello. But we've all gotten so good at this that it's like we know. Deep down we know when someone is doing it. And we know when we're doing it. So it's like you're never gonna actually feel like you can be yourself and bring yourself until you just
Yeah.
cut out that BS. And I'm glad you were able to.
It took a little time, but when you get screwed over by a few people that you had actually initially started putting some trust in, it
Mhm.
does give you, and sorry, queer community, if you're new coming out, it's probably going to happen to you. Someone is going to, like, stab you on the back, and you may not even see it happening until it actually already happened.
It's
But
unfortunate.
it is unfortunate. But here's the deal: it's not just the queer community; it's every community that people do that too. So
Hmm. Hmm.
it just I feel when a few times when it happened to me, I became very aware of everyone and anything I did with anybody in my life, especially in the queer community, because I wasn't getting that result in the group of people I was with. And this is a nice segue talking about chosen family and queer domesticity. So you explore both those as a form of world building and even resistance. What does that look like in real life beyond the romantic idea of a found family?
That's always something that I've actually struggled with. So I'm not gonna lie, I'm probably of the like not popular group here, and where growing up that was one of the huge catchphrases a lot was like, oh, as gay people, we get to choose our own family, we get to do this. And I would be like, I hate that. Like I hate it, hate it, hate it, hate it, hate it. Because I hate this idea of like just sometimes the way it's worded, it almost makes it sound like, but don't worry, you get this consolation prize of like getting something positive that you took the time to build. And it's like, that's not fair. That's taking the onus off of like anything else around you and putting it only on you. So I hated it, just an FYI. But I think it's more interesting even to look at, and I'll go back to when you were talking about like finding the groups that like you feel even more comfortable with. Cause I think a lot of the times people will be like, oh, well, like, yeah, like I think of this person as a brother or a sister, or like I see this older person as like a mentor. But I think it's deeper than that. I think with these groups where you're finding more of a place in it, they do become like a surrogate feeling to you where you're all sharing in the same struggles. You're all likely being treated the exact same way throughout your life in all these different scenarios where you can bond at a different level than anyone can, like even with your own
Uh-huh.
family, because bless even those people out there who have like the most accepting, lovable, like, we love you, you fit in this, they can't understand you. They can empathize with you, but they cannot understand you. And these people can. And I think that that is like this special moment where when you do get lucky and you do find it, it's like grab it, snatch it, grab it, do whatever you want to do with it, give it Stockholm syndrome so it doesn't want to leave you. Like that's your that's your chosen family. And
Yeah.
I think that that is more natural to queer life than, say, like regular family dynamics or friendship groups, because that's where we find ourselves the most us.
So, what does home mean to you now compared to earlier in your life?
I think earlier it was always, and what are you talking about earlier? I'm only 21. I only, what do you mean earlier in my life? um, no, earlier I would say I was like, home is structure, right? It's your house, it's your spouse, it's kids, it's having a dog, it's having a job, it's being able to do this. And where I think it is still, especially in this crazy, chaotic world where certain orange faced people or like other individuals want to keep stealing things and pulling things away, it is to an extent like, oh my God, home is literally where I can go and be safe right now. But I think home has morphed, and it sounds so stupid, but it is that feeling. It's that feeling that someone is going to give you when you can be you. And it doesn't matter where you are, it's not tied to a specific place or time, but it's just you being able to be you and be authentic to you without feeling the need to sacrifice bits of yourself for other things. And I think that, that's a better understanding of home than just saying, "Oh, my home is, it's YZ Drive, 10th line."
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I like that. And for me, it is funny though, talking about the chosen family. And because when I came out to my family, my,
Mm,
actual, birth family, who I was, I I will admit, I created a very strong group of friends. I wouldn't necessarily say that they were my strong, like a family per se, but I would say I definitely created a group of friends that if I had got a different response than I did, that I knew I would get the support from them and
mhm.
that I could continue on to be my, what I thought at that time was my authentic self. Boy, was I wrong. But I feel that in the experiences that I had, it's it's funny to look back at it now and even having the conversation with like my best friend who I've known for we've been friends for over 40 years. She still laughs to this day when I came out to her because she's like, I don't understand why you were so nervous. And I'm like, she goes, I already knew. She goes, it was, but I wanted you to be comfortable before
Mhm,
you told me.
mhm,
And which was a much, much better response than what I initially got from my parents. I will say that. Now, my mom is, obviously she is accepting. There's certain things to this day because my dad has passed away, but my dad was not, he still wasn't really very accepting. I think it's just, I think more what his challenge was, he just didn't get it.
mhm,
He didn't understand it because I don't feel that overall, kind of, he didn't overall have a lot of people in his life
mhm.
that were in our community. And so he didn't understand it. And I say kind of because his stepbrother was an openly gay male and he did have a husband and whatever, but he hated his stepmother. So that's probably why he never had a good relationship with him
Yeah.
because of not that it had anything wrong to do with him, like his stepbrother. It was just he didn't like how his stepmother treated him and his siblings and just life in general. So, but I feel that my mom has done a great job of learning and
Mhm.
what, and then my sister at the time when I came out, my sister was working in, and she still is, was working in Hollywood. I mean, talk about people being like hidden and like
Yeah.
like hiding themselves, especially at that time, still to this day. And it's rather sad because I always laugh when I see think it's like on TikTok, or like, "Ooh, did you know this person might be gay or whatever?" And a celebrity, it's like, I don't care.
Yeah, who
Like,
gives a
I
shit?
mean, now, the funny thing is, and this is where I'd get pushback, that person, whoever that out gay actor, actress, whatever they might be, does help with the representation, with the comfortability, with the people in our community
Uh-huh.
being, okay, well, I can't even think of someone that at the top of my, but um, okay, no, I can't even think of some, I'm drawing a blank at the moment, but for to have someone that, okay, that's like me, they're out, they're this person. Okay, great. But like we've chatted before, and you said, you need to look at yourself. Don't
Uh-huh.
try to compare yourself to someone else,
Uh-huh.
because I think that's the challenge of us in our community, is because if you come out to Aunt Susie
Uh-huh.
and she was like, and she's only seen Will and Grace, and so she thinks, oh, you must be either like Will or Jack, and you're
Uh-huh.
actually neither, then you've now confused the heck out of your
He's gonna say they're like, which tell me which one you are.
because I got ridiculed for it. I mean, when I came out to some people, I worked in a restaurant. There was 3 of us that were gay. I was the only one out of the 3 that did not do drag. And they
Uh-huh.
didn't think that I could be gay because I didn't do drag. And I was like,
Uh,
thanks for prejudging and
yeah.
assuming that everyone who is gay does drag, which is so not
Uh-huh.
true.
Uh-huh.
But and so I had to keep pushing and pushing and showing. Oh, it's funny you brought it up, heated rivalry. But
Ugh.
there are actual, like, there are many sports. There are many people in the community that there are gay sports leagues, and that they have like, whatever it might be they play. But would it be easier, and not in a fictionalized way, like heated rivalry? But wouldn't it be easier if people were able to see so and so athlete that really was out and comfortable? It would be easier. It
Uh-huh.
would be, especially if you wanted to, because you're like, okay, well, if that person is, I can reference that person,
Uh-huh.
that athlete, when I might be coming out to friends, family, whatever, whoever it might be, coworkers, bosses, whatever. But again, it comes back to the authenticity of yourself. You got to be yourself and don't compare yourself to anybody else, really.
And you gotta be, like, real. And I say real, like, another really good and who actually led me to, like, a lot of my thought process around this type of stuff is, this gay writer, Daniel O'Shaughnessy, I think. It's a very hard name to spell, I'm sorry. But he was very big into the, like, workout scene and stuff like that. And, a lot of, like you say, people who are like, "Oh, that's me," like, looking in the thing right now, they're like I think a lot of people are like, gay people are just all about bodies. Like they're all about like ripped. The more you do this, if you don't have this, then I don't know. Are you gay? Like you don't look like you work out all the time.
Uh-huh.
And he talks a lot of like he really does take some vulnerable moments to talk about what a dark rabbit is for him going down. And I think for a lot of us, like that is literally the gateway. Like we struggle with this all the time. So not even having more and more representation out there, again, taking it back to like just because you're seen doesn't mean you're safe. Like having
Uh-huh.
more real life representation. I want someone that looks like me. I want to see a like steamy love story out where people have everyday bodies and not said like you have a oh you're normal as if normal is a bad thing. We are
Exactly.
literally
Yeah,
all who we are. So can I see more of that?
I agree. 100%. All right. So one of the other topics you touch on is queer spirituality, sacred, quiet, myth making, meaning without needing clean resolution. So, for folks who may feel disconnected from traditional religion or spirituality, what does sacredness look like in your world?
I had this purchase because okay, first of all, I when growing up I was Catholic school the whole way, so like welcome. And I know a lot of people are probably like, "Ooh, that means religious trauma," but I'm like, no, not at all, actually. Like, I'm actually very
Thank you
removed
actually
from
for
that.
saying that, because it is funny that I know a coach
Yeah.
who is very all about helping people with religious trauma. Now, I did not grow up in the Catholic Church. I grew up in the Episcopal Church, but I did not have any religious trauma
No.
at all. So, yeah, anyway, sorry, go on. I just have to say that it's funny that people think it's such a big deal. Oh, if you grew up in like a church or whatever, you have to have religious trauma if you're gay,
Yeah,
which is,
and I
or
mean,
queer,
I do
whatever.
talk to I've been very, very like blessed to have such good contacts that did grow up in those places where they do carry that. And I'm like, wow, that's a lot. But I think there
Yeah,
is a
I feel
huge
bad for anyone that did. I just wasn't that person. Like, I didn't have that
right,
experience.
right. It's hard for
Yeah,
you to relate to because you're like, oh, that wasn't my experience like at all. But I mean,
yeah.
it's nice to see both sides. But I think so. Just prefacing whatever I say with that, bless any of those people that are like that did go through that. Um, but I think a lot of it was like, what's named sacred? Like, what is, if we're thinking about everything in the world, everything is just made up, right? Like, all these religions, sure, they have common themes, but like, everything is just kind of made up. And I know, sorry. Like, I'm not gonna get smited down from the world for saying that. So apologies for like those passionate people. But I'm like, but what does that look like for those of us that authority never included, right? Or what those of us who don't have a strong negative adverse reaction to religion, what does that look like for us? Because I do think there are many of us, although like you say, you very rarely hear about it. And so section 3 actually of the book, without spoiling things, is I go a lot more heavy into what I think like queer religion and like basically what we would be like in a spiritual sense would be like. So I know a lot of people will probably read that section and be like, whoa, A, what is he on? B, can I have some? And C, like, what does this have to do with anything? But I wanted to be in this space where I was like, let's start rebuilding meaning after we've all been told that we don't belong or how we should. And I think, especially in religion, there's this push pull where it does mirror anything that we've talked about so far in this episode of this podcast, actually, because like you see the pull of religion being ritual, community, story, forgiveness, structure, like all of these things that we're like, ooh, this brings you your authentic self in your safe space. But there's also then that push of surveillance and shame and conditional love and fixing fear-based belonging. So it's really this like weird dancing with the stars tango dance of like give and take here. And I thought that would be a really interesting place to leave it and take it on to hopefully push people to again start thinking about things differently and being like, if I made up my religion, where what would I be? What would I do? Right? Like where that looks holy to me. So it was a weird moment, and I really hope that people do reach out to me afterwards and say, "What were you on?" Like I don't understand 95% of this because I'll say I don't either. It just felt right.
Well, and I think that, excuse me, I think that growing up in the church like I did, and I was pretty involved. Now, most of what I did when the church, when I was growing up, I was in choir. I was a choir boy. So my partner always gives me grief that I don't know all the details about like the liturgical stuff regarding like everything. And I have to remind him, realize I sat in a choir loft for so many years. I knew what part of the service that we were going to have to stand up and start
Mhm.
singing or have to. So that's how I learned. Now, granted, I did go to a Christian university. I've been pretty consistently overall going to church even still to this day here. But part of the reason where I found the church that I wanted to go to was because it was inclusive, it was accepting, it was a huge diverse congregation and staff of the church. The fact that the church that I started going to when I first moved to Colorado, our senior minister was an openly gay male. And it made it a lot more welcoming
Mhm.
to go, okay, I had had a little some bumps along the way, but more of those bumps were the challenges that I got. Well,
Mhm.
how can you still go to church if you're gay? I don't understand.
Mhm.
Now, that I mean, and that's a whole gosh, that's a whole episode on itself.
I was gonna say that's a rabbit hole. In fact, if you do that, if I could just come and sit in on it, I don't even need to speak. I just need to like listen and just have my little face in the bottom corner.
It and the funny thing is I actually was on a podcast and we talked about Christianity and being queer in the queer community. It was, oh my gosh, I just forgot the name of the podcast. Anyways, that's so horrible, but I'll reference it in the show notes, everyone. Sorry when I find it. But it was very fascinating because the person that was interviewing me had never grown up in religion. They didn't, it's
Mm.
not that they didn't believe in anything. That's just how their family grew up. They just didn't
Mhm.
have that going to church and experiencing, day in, day out. Like I said, my experience was really more based on singing in the church. I didn't really, my sister was the one who participated more in the true church activities as a kid compared to myself, because my sister can't sing.
Nope.
So that's why oh no, oh no,
I was
no,
going to say,
no.
now she's going to come for us.
Oh no, she won't, because she knows she's like amazingly tone deaf and it's awful. So, and my partner, we've gotten to experience it together and it was horrendous. I'm surprised our ears didn't bleed. So I love my sister to death, but woo, she did not get the singing talent. But anyway, so your book resists neat closure. It invites readers to live with, gosh, I can't even speak, ambiguity and becoming. In a culture obsessed with answers and certainty, what has it been like to embrace unfinishedness?
In a weird way. And I know anyone that knows me is going to right now be like, this liar, because I'm such a type A control freak where I'm like, there is no unfinished business. I mean, even poor you, bless your heart, when you were like, I'm not going to give you the questions beforehand, I was like, God damn it. Now what am I going to like? How am I not going to show up as like the wonderfully curated, smart sounding human being? And I was like, "Oh, maybe like you could send me them. I didn't. But I think there's like this, for those of us that maybe do operate in that, there is this power that we never even knew of. In suddenly realizing one day that you can just like wash your hands of something and say, it doesn't need to be ended. No, certainly doesn't need to be ended for anyone else's perspective. But like for your own perspective, sometimes the best closure is no closure at all. Like that may seem cliche, but sometimes having that ability is you taking your power and practicing it in that spot. So that's what I would say I've turned to look at it as. And again, I know I'm going to get like 1,000 messages as soon as people hear this being like, you are not calm. You are not this. And I'm going to be like, true.
So, what does becoming mean to you today?
Becoming, I think, is maybe this is like for all the coaches out there, like when they say becoming is like becoming your best self. But I think it is. Like it's becoming is being able to look at yourself in an unobjective way where you can see where you're right, you can see where you're wrong, you can see where maybe you want to grow. But also you can be selfish enough to look at yourself and say, I don't need to fit into that box for you. I don't need to fit into that box for anyone. And one of my most favorite lines that I wrote in the book, which probably a spoiler, but I was like, I'm not here to provide you with like a neat ending. I'm not here to provide you with anything because I don't know if anyone is a huge believer in the simulation theory that this world is like a simulation, but like, how are you going to have a neat ending or clean ending right now when like it's basically like someone's closed their eyes and is throwing darts at a dartboard to pick what comes next for us? And becoming is just like, who are you? Who are you? Find out who you are. Be comfortable with that person. Before you go do anything else in the world, do that.
I agree. I like that. So, I chatted with you a little bit about this before we started the recording. So, your book, Colin, has a playlist of queer
Mm.
artists, which is such a unique cross platform approach. What made you want to integrate music and video into the storytelling experience?
So I was introduced to Ethel Kane, who was like my love of my life, who is a trans singer artist. And the storytelling that is like in the songs and spread across is very like, even though a lot of it does go into very extremist like sides of things. So I can't say this mirrored my whole life because I, in fact, was not lured into a cult and cannibalized. But the deeper meanings behind it all, I was like, wow, this is so queer life in general. And it's interesting to find she was very focused on the mundane side of things at times, which was also inspiring because it was like there is a lot of beauty and growth in the simple moments. But taking that whole inspiration from it, and just the fact that alone, there truly isn't like there's so many talented queer people out there that just do not get the same recognition that a lot of their counterparts do. And
Uh-huh.
coming from an HR background where like I was like in learning, well, everyone learns differently. We're not all visual, we're not all like mathematics, we don't do this. I wanted to do something for the auditory people and provide an experience that mirrored the book's journey, told through queer voices out there that maybe it was the intended meaning for their song, maybe it was not the intended meaning for the song. But it's again preparing this narrative of just look at things differently. Whether you think it is, whether you think it isn't, it fits at different times. And
Mhm.
there's one song on the playlist, fabulous song, amazing singer. So I'm like worried that eventually, this is me and my delusion, by the way, that I'm like, this celebrity is going to hear this and they're going to hate me for forever. But there's one song by one hetero singer and it's paired with a moment in the book and it's very like symbolic. And I think it shows that break of queer life and time, so to speak. But it was very important to me to bring that different perspective to it and to again try to get people to just look at surroundings in different ways and feel recognized in the words and even just the sounds that we all use and experience.
So, what do you hope readers feel when they explore the playlist alongside the book?
I hope they feel a natural connection to get me in contact with Ethel Kane and then have the next album be co-written. I think it depends. So there's a few moments where the songs or the music are more sensory, and I really hope that people start to pick up on not just the motives that I've used, but like it sounds oh, then this is where I always hate talking about myself because I'm like, I'm not an ego person. I don't want people to think I'm like, you should do this. But like I want them in a way to start again looking at themselves and their lives and how they maybe see things and recognizing these small moments that lead us to these new places and identifying them. And I think that some of these auditory triggers or meanings can do that in a way that written word cannot do. Um, so I hope that's what they take away is this like serene aha moment. But if not, I hope they even just take away, damn, this is a pretty like good playlist. It's an
Awesome.
eccentric playlist, but it's a good playlist.
All right. So, this part of the show, I like to ask my guests rapid fire questions. And these are easy. Just come up with whatever, just tell me whatever comes to your head, your mind first. These are rapid fire. You don't need to have deep thinking. I might, depending on how you answer, I might follow up with a question. What's funny is I didn't realize, I don't know if I've actually really done that too much in the past, but I realized I did that with the couple episodes ago and I was like, oh, I didn't. I'm like, all right, well, but it fit because they answered the question like both. And I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
well, why do you mean both? So, all right. Coffee shop writing session or late night candlelit writing vibes.
Late night. I was like, "Do
A
you want like"
song that do what?
I was like, "Am I supposed to, like, say why?" No, late night. Late night.
No, you don't have to. A song that instantly drops you into your own blue hour mood. All right. So, what's something your younger self would be shocked with what you love now?
My god. Tricky, tricky. Mm, to not take food and body so seriously.
Amen. Yes. All
And not
right.
even shocked, probably mortified. They'd probably be like, "Wait a second, who's on the other end of the seance? This is a lie."
And just a little bonus question. If you could write one sentence on a billboard for queer folks navigating becoming, what would it say?
I don't know. Screw everyone else. No, like, love yourself, nurture yourself. We put so much time in extending beyond, "What's my environment like? What's this like?" No, what's in your own head like? Like, just love yourself, period. Period, dot.
I love that. All right. Well, as we wrap up, Colin, if there's one idea, invitation, or reminder you want our listeners to carry with them today, especially anyone navigating identity, healing, or becoming, what would you want to leave them with?
Start to recognize your own patterns, and I know even to the most chaotic people, they'll say, "I don't have a pattern," but I promise you, you do. And I think once you start to realize your patterns and you start to see how you show up in things or what you're thinking, life just becomes so much easier. You really appreciate yourself and it becomes easier. So start.
I love that. Well, thank you for sharing that, Colin. This has been such a grounding and expansive conversation. I am grateful for the way that you invite us to slow down, soften, and honor the parts of ourselves that don't always fit into the neat boxes or timelines. And for everyone listening or viewing, the Blue Hour Gospel is coming out in late February. And if today's conversation resonated with you, especially around self trust, identity, healing, and becoming, I really encourage you to check it out. And as always, if this episode sparked something for you, a question, a shift, a sense of permission, take a moment to sit with that. Growth doesn't always happen loudly. Sometimes it happens in the quiet. And if you enjoyed today's episode, of course, make sure to follow, rate, and share Empowered and Out. And if you're ready to deepen your own journey around confidence, purpose, and showing up more fully in your life or career, you can always connect with me through my coaching work. So thank you again, Colin. I really do appreciate you coming on. And I know everyone is probably saying thank you as well,
Oh,
because it's definitely been a pleasure.
thank you for being brave enough to have someone on here that you're like, I don't know what is going to come out of his mouth next. I appreciate it.
And so, listeners, until next time, stay empowered, stay out, and keep becoming.